When it comes to systems, you want something that will start showing results fast. You're looking for a tool that can enable your 3PL or warehouse to get to the next level. So why wait? That's why Carton Cloud provides supported, fast onboarding that can have your WMS up and running in hours, not months. Jump into Carton Cloud's easy-to-use workflows for all of your services, including cross-docking, serialized inventory tracking, e-commerce order fulfillment, and more. This software is built by logistics people for logistics people, and those logistics people are standing by to help train you and support you so that you can be successful with your customer. With 24/7 real-time reporting and free online training, you need to check out Carton Cloud for your operation. Take the next step in your operation by heading to cartoncloud.com/free-demo or click the link in the show notes. Welcome to this bonus episode of the New Warehouse podcast, all about humanoid robots. Whether you are on board or still skeptical, humanoid robots are in the warehouse and doing work today. With this technology still being very new to our industry, there are many questions out there, so I went live with Pete Allen of Agility Robotics on LinkedIn for an Ask Me Anything session where I got my questions answered as well as some audience members. We went deep and Pete was very honest with where humanoid robots are and where they are heading. So continue listening for all of the humanoid insights you need.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Our conversation kicks off with Pete Allen discussing how flexibility around humanoid robots exists and where it is heading. Enjoy the episode.
So you talk to any major engineering, mechanical guys, they're like, look, it's a long way out. Now, will it get there? Oh, probably. And will it be able to do some things today, like hold an egg or fold a t-shirt? We've seen those videos online. You pick up a dish. Yeah, it can do some of those things, but it's not going to be highly dexterous to handle, thousands of different SKUs that we're going to find in a warehouse, right? So contrast that to what Agility has done. And I think we're one of the few, I think maybe Boston Dynamics is also doing something similar to us in that we said, hey, let's put different tools on the end of the arms. We call those end effectors, like you said earlier, and let's pick the right end effector for the job that Digit is going to have to do, rather than use a robotic hand to grab a hammer to pound a nail. We just put a hammer on the end. And we think that's a much more practical, logical solution to a robot that eventually becomes multi-purpose over a warehouse. And in one part of the day, it's picking cases and building a pallet. The next part of the day, it's moving a tote from an AMR to a conveyor. And maybe later in the day, it's picking single SKUs. Now, that's not all capable of doing today, but if you had different tooling and the robot can move around the warehouse, now it becomes a multi-purpose functional warehouse with a lot of value to a facility that's having trouble finding labor to fill those roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the key value drivers that I see in the humanoid too, is that flexibility where you have, maybe a different type of robot and, it really can only do maybe one or two different types of tasks, or maybe it's only set in a specific area. But then, I think the humanoids over time, like you said, will be able to become a multi-use tool in a sense, right? Like I put a hammer on the left hand and maybe a screwdriver on the right hand or something like that, right. To be able to, work on stuff and do these different things. So I mean, obviously, some of that is kind of the long-term view, I guess, in a sense of where humanoids are. And I think, we're still pretty early in this space overall. So I guess talk to us a little bit about where are we kind of in terms of the evolution of human robots themselves? Like, I know we're early, but, where are we going and where are we right now? What's kind of in the near future? What's in the long term?
Yeah, so I think we painted the picture of the long term just a minute ago. Like that's the vision, right?
Yeah.
That at least as it relates to warehouses and what I would say manufacturing. That over time, it's a multi-purpose robot that can, run multiple shifts, do different tasks, do different functions. Way long term, it becomes even more multifunctional. Maybe it's doing last mile delivery and all that. But come back to today, because that's where I think a lot of people, they hear the hype, they see the videos. Some videos are really good and they're really real, and some videos might be fake. Just saying.
Fake. Oh.
So look at them, look at them carefully, right? But the reality is, I would say that the industry is in the infancy stage, right? We're just being born. I would say there's 5 or 6 companies that I look at, particularly around North America, that are, have made a splash, right? Their names out there, and I'd be looking at companies like Boston Dynamics with Atlas, Tesla with Optimus, Figure with now O2. They started with O1, Apptronics with Apollo. Those are kind of the main people you see out there raising money and starting to do things. If you think of how many of these robots have been actually deployed anywhere around the world, it's probably less than 20, right? And I would tell you that of that 20, agility and digit probably makes up 15 or more of those. So it's that early stage. And we've been out doing proof of concepts with multiple companies. You're aware publicly of 2 with GXO and with Amazon. I will also tell you there's a large automotive manufacturer and others, and we're signing probably 3 or 4 more contracts by the end of this year to do more of these proof of concepts. And people might ask, like, why are you doing proof of concepts? Why aren't you just selling these robots? Yeah. And this talks to the infancy stage, right? The infancy stage for agility is our robots today are alpha version robots, right? They're not ready for prime time. They are not ready to scale. We're in the phase of deploying these robots to give them real world experience, to collect real world data, to teach Digit to do additional skill sets and start building out the capabilities of this multi-version robot for down the road. I think if I look at the landscape of the other companies I've mentioned, their public comments, they are still in a prototype stage. They're still in their labs tinkering. They maybe have gone and done a video at an automotive manufacturer to show some capabilities, but not over multiple days. Like we've done weeks of performance, months of performance. And as you know from our recent press release, we're now under a long-term RAS agreement with one of our customers in GXO.
Right.
And we're working a full 8-hour shift, Digit is, every single day. So like that's a major difference from being a prototype versus, again, being an alpha. But this is where I like the industry to know, like it's at the infancy, like nobody is ready to scale at this point in time. And I think the vision that we have, and I've heard Tesla and Figure and maybe Apptronics also allude to, is like they start to think about scale and not mass, but and when I say scale, by 25, late 25, early 26, maybe 100 of these robots are out there in the world doing work. And then beyond that, when these become general release, kind of 26, 27, that's when you start to see this take off.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's very interesting to hear those numbers too, that, there's probably only 20 humanoids actually out there doing work in a sense. And obviously, that the news around GXO was certainly huge that you guys got in there, I think initially for the pilot at this Banks facility, I think it was, right? And then obviously the recent news, I think, was even kind of like a huge step, I think, for the humanoid space, right? Actually putting out, like you said, a RAS, paid deployment in a sense. So, and certainly there's a lot of money being raised and capital being raised around humanoids too, as well. So there's definitely belief there that, this is going to be something. I think it's interesting to hear those numbers too, by 25, 26, you said about 100 out there. So, I mean, tell us a little bit more
about that deployment with GXO. What exactly is Digit doing there? Tell us, I guess, around that too. What does the setup look like around Digit? What are some of the safety things that are in play there? Additionally, tell us kind of like, how does that look in an operation?
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes.
Yeah, it's a great point. I might back it up and say, how do we start with a POC, right? And then I'll weave it into GXO, because I think it's interesting that every POC that Agility has done has resulted in a repeat order or a repeat new function they want us to do. So that says that when we do a POC, what we do is we set up a scope of work for the initial work we're going to do, along with KPIs. Like what's the throughput going to look like? How many units per hour are we going to move? Because people always say, well, these robots are really slow, and they're right? Yeah. When I was talking about the evolution of the robots, I should have said, hey, in the alpha stage version, these robots are not at human parity. Then in some cases, they're not even close. I'll say to you in the audience here that in the original POC at GXO, we reached by the end about 65% of the human rate, so units per hour, totes per hour for that workflow. And GXO said, hey, we want to sign up to the RAS model. We want to extend this, but we want to see improvements. And here's some ideas. And we work together collaboratively on that. And in that facility, what we're doing, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, this goes back to the original part of your question, Kevin, sure, is we are interfacing directly with a Chuck 6 Rivers. So what happens is a Chuck pulls up with order totes that are full, and it gets to a certain destination, and it essentially sends a message to Digit, our robot, and says, hi, Digit, I'm here. Now, it doesn't really do that, but that's effectively what the message is implying, right? So Digit then goes, okay, I've got work. So on that Chuck 6 Rivers AMR, there are 4 totes, 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. Digit now will have to identify each one of those totes, pick them up, first figure out where to grip the tote, pick it up, and then turn around and walk to an outbound conveyor that's taking the tote to pack out. So when Digit is done moving those 4 totes, it signals to Chuck, hey, Chuck, I'm done. You can go. And then a new one comes in. So we met with their leaders recently, and they were pleased, very much so, about the improvement in Digit since the POC. We're using new end effectors. So in the original POC, we had the paddles on the end effector. For those who've looked at the videos, we now are using our claw gripper. It allows us to get to the tote more efficiently, turn faster, so rate has already increased, things like that. But when you think of the robots, because you mentioned safety, and if I go back to your evolution question, right, there are kind of 3 things that I think are key to how successful and how fast these robots are going to scale. One is, can they reach human parity in terms of rate for the workflow that they're doing, or at least get close, right? They don't have to be exact, but they get close enough, people are going to be happy with that, because we can't find people to fill these jobs anyway. So that's one. 2 is battery life, right? That's a big issue for these robots today. And you can look online and see different quotes from companies, but the best is like 4-to-1 ratio, meaning 4 hours of work to 1 hour of charge. You're going to need to get to like 10-to-1, right? So you can do a full shift. You might take a 5 or 10 minute break to charge like a person would do. And that will be totally acceptable for people. And then the third one, which is not talked about enough in this industry, is safety. Safety is a big deal when it comes to humanoids. And here's why. There is no safety regulation today that exists for bipedal robots or humanoid robots. We at Agility are largely following the AMR standards, but again, there's no set standards for these robots. And these robots reason that matters, right? These robots are dynamically powered, meaning if for whatever reason they lose power, they're going to fall. So there's a chance they could hurt somebody. They could land on somebody. It's just in the wrong place, wrong time. So out of abundance of caution, and we put a safety barrier around the workflow that Digit is in. Okay. Now, is that scalable long term? No, it's not. And it's not because Digit can't see an object, a person, and walk around it or stop. It can, but there's no industry standards, and there's still a path to making these cobots. Now, if you watch videos, you're going to think these are cobots. If you look at a lot of the videos out there, right. They are not. None of them are. Nobody can make that claim because of the lack of regulation that's out there. So it's just something for people to understand that the three things are like throughput, battery life, and safety, in order for these to take off. And we are very well versed in this because we have people who've been in this industry doing robotic automation for a long time. You look at Melanie Wise, right? She helped write the standards for AMRs, right? Safety standards. She's in the midst of helping write the standards for humanoids. So we're well in touch on the safety side. We're well in touch on the throughput side. We have another person who's our CTO, Cross Filippinati, who was at Berkshire Grey. So a lot of really intelligent people building our robots who have been in this space. They understand warehouses. They understand the things that go into this. I contrast that to some of the other leaderships of other companies and go, well, do they know about all this stuff? Because they're not talking about safety as an example.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's certainly an important topic around that too, because I think, even as you mentioned there, kind of, people comment on the speed of it. And that's certainly something I noticed too in some of these videos where, obviously the videos that are being put out around humanoids are garnering a ton of attention, right? And so you can look at some of your videos, even like I've seen on your YouTube channel, where people are commenting things like that, like, oh well, here they come to replace us, right, in the warehouse, or like, I could do that like much faster, like I could do 4 times the work than that robot's doing right there. Right. And, it's all these different varying points of view. But I think as you look from a safety perspective, I think that's very interesting that the technology is so new in a sense that like there's not even safety standards around it. So I mean, I guess when we go back to the evolution in a sense, I mean, what's kind of maybe the timeline for those safety standards, and as we see maybe those 100 robots potentially out there by 2026, like you mentioned, I mean, will those robots be out there, and will they be, working right alongside a human at that point, do you think? Or, are we still kind of a little bit more time before we get to that really collaborative situation?
Yeah, I certainly can't comment to other humanoid robots because, again, I don't hear them talking about this at all. Like it's not mentioned. So I wonder, one, if they know about it, and 2, if they're working on it, right? So, but I will say from an agility perspective, mentioning Melanie Wise, she's on this. She was on this during AMRs. She's on this now. We're working with the bodies like ANSI and others to create the standards. And as we evolve our robot, as I said earlier, we're alpha right now. We are building and releasing our beta robots later this year. With that robot, we expect to see increase in battery life. We expect to see increase in throughput, which we're already seeing increasing throughput at GXO just from software improvements, right? So you start to think about, hey, who's out there collecting real world data that can feed AI models to make improvements faster, right? The only one who's really doing anything at scale is us. So we're seeing that improvement because the software is improving, the AI is improving, all of that kind of thing. So as we release our GA version, which will probably be late 25, early 26, you will see a robot that is fully built to be a cobot, and we'll have all the safety capabilities in there. So we expect to be fully cobot, collaborative robot, walking in the same spaces as people, alongside people, when we release that particular product. Probably, like I said, late 25, early 26, and we've been working on the standards with the industry now for quite some time.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's good to hear, because I think that, for one, obviously, the more we bring robots of any different form factor into the warehouse themselves and, have expectations that they're going to be able to coincide with humans, we obviously want that safety factor to be in there. So it'd be interesting to see that. And certainly, I think we'll see humans like walk into the day and say, oh, did you see the football game last night or something like that? And make them way more collaborative in that sense, right? I think that'd be very interesting to see. So as we continue to look at humanoids additionally, and you guys have deployed, arguably, you guys have probably made the most advancements in that sense, right? Actually getting out there, doing work, getting past those kind of proof of concepts in a sense that you talked about earlier. And I'm curious from the perspective of, other robotic types, right? We look at AMRs, picking arms, and, as humanoids continue to evolve, and it sounds like, we're probably definitely a few years out before there's like widespread humanoids in any way. I mean, do they start to make other robotic form factors almost obsolete or irrelevant in a sense because of the flexibility they might bring?
My view is the opposite of that. My view is that humanoids should become very complementary products to a lot of existing automation. And from an agility perspective, what we do well today and we see doing well for the foreseeable future in a warehouse is connecting islands of automation. And what do I mean by that? So think of the GXO example. A truck pulls up to a point. Today, a human has to go grab all those totes off and put it on the conveyor. People don't want those jobs. It's dull, it's repetitive. They do it over and over again. Their backs get hurt, they're injured. Turnover rates 100 to 200%. So that's an example. So AMR, either inputting a tote to an AMR or deducting a tote from an AMR, I think will remain complementary. We're not replacing AMRs. Humanoids are not going to walk fast enough to carry things down 100-yard aisle like an AMR can, right? So complementary there. I see us as complementary to put walls. We can induct totes into a put wall. We can deduct order totes out of a put wall. Again, that's a repetitive task that people are doing today that they don't want to be doing. ASRSs, right? The same kind of work happens there. Totes get inducted, totes get deducted. Caseworking, people are building pallets, depalletizing. We actually are going to be doing a new skill set that hopefully you'll see at the next big show. But we're already working on palletizing with totes, right? Stacking totes, palletizing. Like that's really hard for humanoid to do, but it's pretty cool.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Interesting there.
So I see this is complementary is the bottom line.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. Definitely. I see we have a question here. We had two. I'm not sure what happened to Vinay, but Andrew, if you want to come off mute here, thanks for joining, and I'll be happy to hear your question or thoughts.
Yeah, I had a question about a potential use for Digit or other humanoid robots. A lot of this stuff that we see in the demo videos, it seems like, warehouse work or factory work. It's kind of like in that concrete building, but not really getting out into the world, not being used outdoors. And so one scenario I was thinking about was at airports, like loading and unloading luggage from airplanes. When, there's humans doing that, of course they do it fine, but, they could strain their back, they could get injured. It might be cold, It might be raining. And maybe if a robot did a really good job of it, and the airline wanted to know that regardless of which airport they went to, they always had a good, efficient worker to load and unload the luggage. Maybe the robot actually goes in the plane, in the belly of the plane, and stays with the luggage so that it can unload when it gets to the next airport. I don't know. So I was just curious, and I know, Pete, you're probably not allowed to talk about secret things with agility, but have you guys ever looked into that? Or and how would these robots perform outdoors? How would they perform in the cold or in the rain, things like that?
Yeah, Andrew, it's a great question. It's a long-term vision question, right? I would say that look at the different companies that I mentioned and kind of look at, their messaging and what are they focused on? And then, start to think about how does that play out long-term? I mean, some are focused on putting robots in your home, to do what? I'm not exactly sure, but okay, that's one approach. At Agility, we took the approach of where is there real work needed today that a robot like ours could actually perform and do and demonstrate that, hey, there's a path here. And for us, that was warehouse and manufacturing. And, we were the first to jump on that path. I think others have followed us down that path. If you look at, Aptronic, you probably see very similar messaging to us now, but that wasn't how they started. But to your point, can Digit go outside? Yes, Digit's gone on hikes. There's videos out there on YouTube where Digit's walking across a lawn. You've seen Digit climbing stairs. There's a lot of different things out there. So long term, if you ever heard Jonathan Hurst speak, he paints a vision of Digit doing multiple things outside of buildings, right? Could be a great example of if you have the right end effector to pick up luggage and the robot can handle the weight. Yeah, that could be something that down the road in the future, I don't see why it couldn't do that. And if you wanted to stick it in the belly of the plane to fly it to the next hub, just make sure there's a charger there so it gets plenty of fuel so it can do its next set of work. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's probably not the next 3 to 5 years.
Great. Thanks for your answer. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks for that question, Andrew, and thanks for joining us here. So I kind of have a question around that because Andrew mentioned in there too, kind of around like the rain and things like that. From a temperature perspective, if we look at warehousing in particular, right, we have, cold chain facilities and things like that. And obviously those environments are not ideal for humans. I mean, is there temperature limitations around, I guess, humanoids or Digit specifically that they need to be in climate controlled areas, or is there potential where we could see them kind of going into freezers and refrigerated areas to be able to take over some of that human exposure to temperatures?
Yeah, Kevin, we get asked that question a lot. I would answer it this way, that Digit, based on the design of the mechanicals within it, is capable of working in ambient and chilled environments, right? And chilled generally doesn't go below 34. It's probably a little higher than that, but it's not ready for frozen yet, right? Frozen takes on different concerns like humidity in the robot and water and things like that. But it's something that, again, if you think of roadmap, right, and we are very focused and intentional about being in warehouses and factories to train Digit to do things that we know will take it outside of those buildings in the future. But it also means it'll take us deeper in those buildings, like into frozen at some point in time. But again, probably not in the next few years. There's too much work outside of the freezer right now for that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking from the perspective of where humans don't want to be. I guess in a sense,
it's a great point.
Yeah. Interesting. So it'd be interesting to see that for sure. So if we have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand, like Andrew did there, and we'll bring you up here to ask that question. But we did have some questions in the comments here of the event posting as well. So let's maybe jump to some of those. So we had a question from Rachel over at Resonant Link, and she says she loves them, but she is skeptical. She's curious what the lifetime of a humanoid looks like compared to other physical automation, and if there's going to be a whole new role of humanoid technician, how different would the skills be that are needed to keep them from running, from programming to maintenance? And that's kind of what she's wondering about.
Yeah, no. So first of all, I think there's skeptics out there for sure. I think there are people that see the vision, like, oh my God, if this actually works, it's going to be amazing, and it could take a lot of the work that people don't want on, and that's a good thing, right? In a lot of ways. And I like your comment about the robot technicians, what's going to happen there. And our view is it's going to create jobs in this area, right? So going from being a worker in a warehouse to all of a sudden now you're either a robot technician, you're a robot supervisor, you're managing what we call ARC, but you're managing the fleet software, and you're managing all the robots that are in the building. You're connecting it to your WMS, right? There's a whole world of opportunities that opens up. So yes, we do see customers training their people, or we train their people to be humanoid technicians, to be humanoid operators, running that fleet software. So there's a lot that could come out of that. And I think maintenance is a great question. And I sound biased to Agilia, but I do give us credit for things that we are first to do. we mentioned being on top of safety, huge important topic. What also hasn't been talked about by a lot of folks in the industry is how are you going to maintain thousands of robots across many geographies as this scales? We've thought about that too. We can't build that whole network, but there are companies out there, and be on the lookout for a press release on next Monday to hear more about that particular topic.
Okay, teeing it up there. We got some news coming on Monday.
Promotion.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So very interesting there, and I think that is an interesting perspective because it's creating like a whole nother field almost in a sense, and like how are you going to support that? So it's very interesting there. So it looks like we got some other questions here from Ravindra and Adrian, who both raised their hand pretty much at the same time. So I guess Ravindra, you want to go first here and ask your question?
Hi, thanks, Kevin, and Pete for the wonderful insight on this. My question is basically related to the long term, like how economical the humanoids would be in terms of one-time expenditure and as well as the regular maintenance compared to if we employ a human being for doing that job.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to answer this question. So it depends if you are looking at a CapEx model or a robot as a service model, right? So in a CapEx model, the company who's buying the product is going to own the maintenance and everything else. And by the way, I probably skipped over part of Rachel's question in the comments. Right now, we're anticipating these robots, working for upwards of 20 hours, for their lifetime. So you'd have a replacement at that point. At some point, you're out of warranty or you're responsible for maintenance, et cetera. Not uncommon, like a person when they go on workers' comp or get injured or things like that, right? So you're going to have trade-offs both ways. If you go to a RAS model, though, and I should have said as well, on both a RAS model and a CapEx model, when we get to GA, we expect the ROI on these robots to be less than 2 years, right, on a 2-shift operation. So the economics should work out very nicely. But in a RAS model, we become responsible for the maintenance, for the replacement. So as long as you're paying the operating fee, it's economical to you, it's lower than your operating expense. We have to replace the robot if it fails. We have to fix the arm if it breaks. We have to do whatever it has to be done to make sure that robot continues to do the work in the environment. Ravinder, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you for the question there, Ravindra. And Adrian, you want to ask your question?
All right. Good afternoon. 2-part question. What's the ratio that you're targeting for like the technician? Like one technician can handle X amount of robots. And then the second part is for the maintenance part. I know that we have robots putting together cars, but I just went automatically to thinking about robots repairing robots. So do you have like any plans? Like the robots like, okay, let me make this part easy to replace for a robot to replace. So, even the maintenance part is kind of handled.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think in terms of the, how many technicians at a site to how many robots at a site, I think we're still learning. Like it's still early days on that. But I can imagine it wouldn't be much different than I'm guessing, but wouldn't be much different than what's the ratio of AMRs to a technician, right? Because they're similar in scope of things like that for that area. In terms of robots repairing robots, I'll take you one step further. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. It might down the road, but we have opened our Robo Fab. We are one of the very few humanoid robotics companies that plans to build our own robots. Facility is in Salem, Oregon. It has been designed to build up to 10,000 digits a year, right? So we start talking about scale starting in 26 and really starting to ramp beyond that. We already have the capacity to do it. And do we envision digits doing work in that warehouse? Moving totes, moving cases, bringing parts to different areas. Yes, we do.
Interesting there. Yeah.
Adrian, does that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
All right, great.
All right, cool. Thank you, Adrian, for that question. And very interesting thought there, like robots, fixing robots. And essentially, digits saying, hey, other digit, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? That's right.
Little massage at the end of the day.
Yeah. Working those
You
two
want some grease
shifts,
over
right?
here?
So
Yeah,
if I may, like
sure.
there's so you know certain robots that are or automated forklifts or whatever, they know at certain level, battery level, they're like, okay, I'm not gonna make it. I'm gonna get stranded. I need to go and to my charging station. You know, it's almost like, hey, look, some part of me is reaching the end of its
Yep.
operational and mechanical life. And so I was wondering if that kind of prompt would be something you guys are thinking about.
I mean, for batteries already, yes. Like Digit today knows it's low, reduced power is coming up. It's got to go charge. A new Digit would walk into the workflow. This is what happens at GXO and Amazon today. New Digit comes in, other Digit goes out. The workflow keeps going. When we get to that 10-to-1 power ratio in a general release robot that I talked about, basically what'll happen is Digit will work for a good amount of time and then have a very short break to recharge. That's what that 10-to-1 is saying. It's basically saying I can work an 8-hour shift just like a human being, and I'll take probably about the same amount of breaks as the human does. So it'd be on par as long as the workflow is on par, the charge is on par. Now you can easily replace somebody who doesn't want that job anyways.
Yeah, thank you for coming up and asking the questions. Very interesting thoughts there, and definitely very interesting to hear about that from that perspective. And I think it'd be interesting, I think we're at a space, we talked a lot about evolution here, where, these things are going to continue to evolve, and we'll see kind of how they're going to play out. But obviously, you mentioned there the Robo Fab factory, right? That's going to be pumping out 10,000 digits a year at some point. I mean, obviously you guys are all in on the humanoids there and really, seeing this as the future there. So I'm curious, we had another question in the comments here, and you kind of mentioned a couple times here around how you have the RAS model or CapEx model, but the question is, how are they bringing the BOM down or the bill of materials down? And I think in turn that's meaning, how are you guys working on bringing costs down, and what does that look like?
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question, right? When you're a startup and you build your prototype robot, it probably costs 10x what you want the thing to cost when it really goes to scale. And then you get to your alpha stage and now it's probably, 3x. But you've only built, call it 25, 30 of these robots, right? So you're building them by hand, costs are expensive, you're getting no supply chain benefit of scale and buying in volume. Then you turn to your beta version and you start to say, okay, by 25, we're getting towards 100. You start to get a little bit better pricing. Bombs start to come down, right? Because you're getting a little bit of volume. But then you start to hit the ramp towards 26, 27, and you've got your general release robot. You've got your own factory building them. You can control your costs better. You can buy in more volume. Your costs continue to come down. And that's where we see this evolving. We have a very clear path from alpha to beta to general release of the bombs scaling down. We know exactly how it's going to happen. And, we see the scale taking off because Digit already has skills that no other humanoid robot has. Digit can move these totes. It's doing it already in production. No one else has done these things in production yet. We have other skills that are coming out this year for other customers where, you see stacking and destacking and pallet building and perhaps depallet building. We evolve into cases next year. Like these are all things that are skills that are just going to keep evolving, making Digit more and more valuable to customers as they move them around the warehouse.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting to look at because I guess there's the scale where you can bring production costs down, but then to your point there's additional value that's going to continuously get added over time as those functionalities continue to develop and things like that. So very interesting there, and kind of along the lines too. I mean, I think last time we spoke was Momentum, right? Manhattan's conference there, and there was definitely some interesting discussion around the idea of a virtual gym too. I think Matt Dermody from Manhattan was talking about. So if anybody's listening and they haven't heard that conversation, you can check that out on the New Warehouse YouTube there with Pete and a couple of folks from Manhattan Associates, which was very interesting. But so you've kind of teased here a little bit in our conversation about some things that are coming, press release on Monday. And, obviously we've seen Digit at some of the major trade shows over the last 2 years, certainly garnering a lot of attention on the floor where they're actually doing work there, right? So what's coming kind of in the near future that you can tell us to look out for? Are we going to be seeing something interesting from Digit at ProMat next year potentially?
Oh, for sure. Definitely. And I won't give it away because, I think you saw the evolution, right? If you were at ProMat 2 years ago, you saw Digit for the first time, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And it was funny.
Yeah.
Somebody at Modex said to me when I first saw it, I thought it was a gimmick. And he goes, "But now here at Modex, I see it's doing different things. So now I can kind of see the vision because at ProMat, it was moving an empty tote from a fake OPEX sure sort to a fake conveyor." And people were like, "Oh, that's cute." Like, and I don't blame them to a degree, right?
Yeah.
But then they come to Modex and they're like, "Wait a minute, it's still doing that, but now the totes are full. That's interesting. Oh, and it's doing this other workflow where it's taking this gigantic tote and it has these claws that didn't have that before, right? The idea of changing the end effector starts to come into play, and people are starting to go, "Wow, this might be real." Now, I will tell you, there will be an absolutely new workflow that will, I hope, blow people's minds because no humanoid will ever have done what we're going to do at ProMat. So if you're going to ProMat, come check us out. I don't know our booth number yet, but it'll be exciting to see. But I would also, one topic I think that we should hit on, Kevin, because I know we have like 10 minutes left, is kind of AI, right? And this ties to the virtual gym comment from Matt Dermody at Momentum when we had the talk down there. And I think I said something similar at that show, but I'm actually more educated on it now. I could probably talk a little deeper on this now, in that I'm sure most of the people still on the call here or on the conference here would agree with this comment. AI is the most overhyped thing in every industry out there. That's my starting point.
Okay.
Now, if you look at a lot of the humanoid companies, though, that's their lead. And that's why they have raised millions of dollars. And I give them all the credit in the world for doing it. Like, amazing. Like, I love what they've done. But the reality is, you can't use simulation only to train AI because you're going to miss what happens in the real world. And if anybody knows anything about AI models, they need massive amounts of data to feed them. And that data cannot be simulated. It has to be real, which is why we're collecting so much data in real environments today. And it gives us this edge because here's an example. If I go to pick up a tote that weighs 35 pounds, the robot's not going to know that. It's also not going to know where that weight is distributed. Is it in the back? Is it in the front? It's probably not even in a warehouse, right? So how do you simulate that? You don't. So to get real world data as an example like that, it will help feed those models. And then tying it back to Matt's comment in the virtual gym, once you have learned this skill, you can now throw it up into the virtual gym for all of your robots and pass it down to all of them. And now they immediately have it and they can do the same functionality. So we see real world data tying in with AI over time to accelerate the development of skills to make the robot more functional over time and faster over time.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I think that's such a great point to talk about. And I'm surprised we talked for so long and didn't mention AI, right? That's probably like a new thing for the industry, right? But yeah, I think it is so interesting because a lot of that is driving, like you said, the evolution there in a sense. And I know we keep coming back to evolution, but right now it's all about kind of building it up and all that data collection that you mentioned, and how do we start to scale operations with these humanoids and teach them the same skills in a sense, and AI is going to enable that. So is the AI in a sense for the humanoid, is that like the driving like the brain of the humanoid, would you say? Like, is it AI based, or how would you say like the intelligence of the humanoid is kind of coming together in play?
Yeah, so I would say like starting point is the hardware of the robot, and the early software has to be physically enable AI, right? It's going to be able to collect data. It has to have perception. It has to be autonomous to be able to see things and move. But over time, it'll start to get the semantic level of it and kind of what you were alluding to. And you see this on some of the videos, right? Our innovation team, and I say this intentionally, has done videos at an investor day and other places with large crowds where they're showing the potential for the future of using large language models and talking to Digit. And I'll give you two examples that they've done, which probably three, but I'll give you two in the essence of time. One was they said to Digit at a show, Pross, our CTO, was talking to Digit, says, Digit, I need you to go grab the case that's the color of Dark Maul's lightsaber and move it to pier number 4. So Digit has to go out and use, Chat GPT and figure out, okay, that's the purplish reddish box. And Digit did it. Now, another one that was more amazing was CNBC was in to do a video shoot with Peggy Johnson, our CEO. And at some point they were doing this large language model, innovative, kind of semantic intelligence demo. And they say to Digit, hey, Digit, can you show Peggy how much you love her? And if you've ever seen Digit at trade shows or whatever, you know that Digit's eyes can change to icons of hearts or shamrocks and things like that. And so we thought that that's what Digit would do. It would do a heart icon on its eyes. That's not what Digit did. Digit actually went and found boxes that were in the area they were and built a heart shape with the boxes on the floor.
Oh, wow. Wow.
We were pretty amazed by that. That was not expected.
Yeah. Interesting. Is that video out there? I don't think I saw that one.
I don't think that one's out there. The one with the Darth Maul comment is.
That one sounds familiar.
But that's an example of where we have an innovation team that's working on these things and where the physical intelligence will start to meet the semantic intelligence. And then when that starts to happen, it enables faster skill set development, which then is passed on to the collective of all the robots within that fleet.
Interesting. That's pretty interesting how it made the heart out of the boxes. So maybe a question there around safety there too. I mean, as I guess the brain, as in a sense, starts to develop more on humanoids. I mean, how do you regulate that to maybe not make some decisions that, like you said, like that was kind of like an unexpected result, right? So like, how do you regulate that so it doesn't get to a point where maybe the humanoid makes some decision that like you really wouldn't want it to make?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I think we're trying to put barriers around it that keep it in line with the work that it's doing, right? So I think we envision a day, if we think about these language models again, where a warehouse supervisor can say, hey, Digit, I want you to go grab those cases over there and move them over here and build a pallet of 6x4 by whatever, right? Whatever the pattern should be. And the Digit knows that's its lane. It can have some autonomy to figure out which cases it's going to grab first and where it's going to start the pallet. We leave that to Digit to figure out. And that's the example of the heart, right? Digit figured out how it wanted to do the heart, but it's not going to be like Digit can go, oh, hey, I want to take a break instead, or I want to go grab totes instead, right? There'll be guardrails along the way, and how that's technically done, I don't know exactly, but the fact that we are very committed to things like, hey, we're not going to be involved with military, we're not going to weaponize Digit, we're not going to allow Digit to harm humans in any way, speaks to a little bit of that guardrailing being put on.
Gotcha. Okay. So Digit's not going to say, oh, let me prop the side door here and go outside and have a smoke or something like that, right?
Yeah, probably not. No. Okay. It could go for a hike if we asked it to, but it's not what it's going to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have to be careful there. If you get upset with Digit, you say, go take a hike, right? You might just go
actually go take a hike,
right?
Good point.
Yeah. Good interesting there. So very interesting stuff with you here, Pete. And, always interesting to talk about this technology. I mean, I think it's super cutting edge for our industry and still a long way to go, but very interesting to see the progress that Agility has been able to make, especially with the deployments out there where Digit is actually doing work and doing those types of things. So I want to thank you for joining me here today, Pete, and being open about all things humanoids here. And thank you to those who who tuned in as well and chimed in with some questions. But I guess before we wrap up here, Pete, if people are interested in learning more about agility or asking you additional questions about humanoids in general, or maybe they're wondering when can they see Digit in person the next time, why don't you fill us in on some of those details?
Yeah, so I would say that if you're interested in any of those things, you can reach out to me through our website on our partners page. There's a portal there. You can put a message in and I'll respond to it. I'll get the message. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just type in my name. I'm sure you'll find me. You can send me a message there and I'm happy to answer any questions, help you out. We do visits to our Salem Robo Fab for customers and partners who are interested. You can see them, but you'll likely see Digit at multiple events at different times of the year, but definitely at ProMat. If you're going to ProMat, you're going to come see quite an interesting show.
All right, great. And thank you for that, Pete. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. So make sure you are subscribed to the New Warehouse podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or head to thenewwarehouse.com for all things The New Warehouse. So Pete, thank you once again for joining me today. And thank you, everybody, for listening out there.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from The New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.